One of the reasons that politicians get a lot of heat from citizens is because they so often take politically expedient routes or choose their party over principles, but only after they spend significant time convincing voters that they will do no such thing. Take, for instance, Mark Warner, a Democrat who was reelected to his second term in the U.S. Senate in 2014. There's Senator Warner right there. He has an op-ed up at the Washington Post in which he describes his newfound support for a ban on semi-automatic rifles, which of course he refers to as your and my favorite term, assault weapons. This is a reversal for Senator Warner, who in April of 2013 voted against a Democrat bill, Democrat-sponsored legislation, calling for it was called the assault weapons ban of 2013. Now, Senator Warner decries his former self and reveals what he portrays as an internal moral struggle that has stuck with him these past 5 years. An internal struggle that miraculously showed up just ahead of midterms, which will be followed closely by a growing field of candidates in the Democrat primaries next year. A field of candidates that Mark Warner is heavily rumored to be a member. So in other words, when he needed Virginia's votes in 2014, he covered his tracks the year prior, probably with the blessing of party leaders who knew he needed to be pro-gun to win. Now that his aspirations are pointing to higher office, suddenly his principles have found reasons to shift. So now Warner declares that he is signing on as a sponsor for a brand spanking new weapons ban, one that he surely knows has no prayer of passage, and he made sure to offer his Second Amendment bona fides, you know, the ones that he leaned on to get reelected in 2014 as a way of having his cake and eating it too. He says, quote, "I do this as a gun owner and a proud supporter of the Second Amendment. Before coming to the Senate, I served as governor of Virginia, a state with a long tradition of gun ownership. During my time in office, I signed into law a number of reasonable bipartisan bills solidifying the rights of law-abiding gun owners to purchase and carry firearms for sport and self-defense," end quote. Now in the very next paragraph, he says, and I quote, "But like other parts of our Constitution, the Second Amendment isn't absolute," end quote. This is often an unexplored talking point that's so often used by anti-gun advocates. What they intend is to make absolute a bad word. Absolute is closed-minded, not common sense, etc., etc. But they're wrong. And like all laws, and I mean all laws, the Second Amendment is absolute in the sense that as it is written is how it's enforced. Laws making it illegal to commit first-degree murder, those are also absolute. There's no room for interpretation. It's the law as written, period. It's a natural law first and foremost. I mean, the ability to express yourself how you would like to, the ability to peacefully assemble, to worship freely, your right to free speech, your right to bear arms, these are considered natural rights. Now, are any of the laws that I mentioned previously, if you're, obviously laws against murder or theft, etc., are they amendable? Are they changeable? I mean, even, speech in the Second Amendment. Our system was designed to allow for this. Just nobody ever actually attempts it because it would never work. What Senator Warner is trying to do is make absolute adherence to the written law seem radical because the progressive left believes in what they think is a living, breathing constitution, one that can be interpreted and reinterpreted without the cumbersome shackles of process, which is exactly what a weapons ban that this so-called Second Amendment supporter is supporting. Not an amendment. It's not a process. They want a usurpation, a bastardization that suits their political agendas, and they want to do it without going to the people in the way they are supposed to go to them. We have a process, and it requires you to do a lot more convincing than this individual, Senator Warner, or his party have bothered to do so previously. I mean, absolutists? Of course. You bet. Absolute about the process. Absolute about the intent. Absolute about the law. And if he wants to change things, he can go ahead and try. But the Constitution is not as malleable as your principles.